Hello, everyone. This is Tim Rowan. Welcome to the ongoing series that I've been hosting called Meet the CEO. Today, I'm really pleased to introduce you to Savii. We have with us Jenna Schwartz, who is the Senior Director of Business Development, and Ashley Wharton, the CEO and CTO of Savii. So, Jenna, Ashley, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Can we start with finding a little bit about Savii? You know, I know that you're one of the newer and smaller companies in home care, and I think perhaps not everyone knows all of the things that you do. So Jenna, could you start us off and give us a little Savii background?
Absolutely. So Savii is a home care agency management platform servicing the private duty or non-medical side of this industry. We handle everything from referral, intake, scheduling, point of care documentation, EVV through billing, payroll, and reporting. Ashley, is there anything you want to add to there as well?
I think that captures it. Thanks, Jenna.
Okay.
All right, great, thanks. You know, what we've been doing here with this series is trying to get some expertise from within the tech community to give us a little bit of insight, a little bit of forecast, if you will, into what they can expect through the rest of 2021 and maybe beyond. We're coming out, of course, of a difficult year. Everything is upended. Nothing is normal. And all of the software companies and other technology companies that serve home care and hospice and home health have been doing everything they can to adapt and help their clients to adapt. So either one of you who wants to start off, what do you see coming with what we look back on and what you know about the industry? What should people be preparing for as we move through 2021, hopefully out of the pandemic and into somewhat normal times again?
You okay if I take it, Jenna?
Right.
I think the fundamentals won't have changed, and you mentioned it earlier in our conversation. The finding, nurturing, retaining caregivers is critical. I think pressure, financial pressure as payments are reduced or not keeping pace with inflation, while caregiver rates are increasing. I think that's another significant factor. So a lot of the fundamentals haven't changed, year over year. I do think the pandemic has put a focus on the ability to meet a lot of care needs in the community. I mean, in the industry, we always knew that anyway, right? I think that's opened other people's eyes, community-based care. And when we look at everything from our perspective, our strategic perspective, when we look at everything, what we need to do is enable the agency owners, agency operators, and caregivers to function or to make the connections that are adding a lot of value. So the agency caregiver client connection, the agency owner operator caregiver connection, nurturing those relationships versus clicking on buttons, doing things a computer should be able to do around revenue cycle, for instance, or ease of scheduling. So not tying up resources on the mundane, repeatable tasks, but allowing those folks to develop real connections. And I think that's another thing that the pandemic has shown, that the importance of that relationship and that culture between everyone in that circle of care is a key to success. So from our perspective, what we want to do is remove the friction on the day-to-day repeatable mundane tasks. Does that kind of resonate at all?
That's an important start, because what tech companies have always done, of course, is tried to help their clients to be more efficient, to do more with less.
Yep.
So I'm wondering, Jenna, in the area of business development, you are tasked with talking to potential clients or talking to the market in general with messages and press releases and the like, and teaching your sales staff what the message is. So what is it that you say to people that they need to prepare for? And of course, why they would want to choose Savii to do that with them?
It's a great question. So I think one of the first items is understanding that individual prospect. I think there isn't a one size fits all, and why there's such a benefit to so many solutions in the marketplace is really understanding what their needs are. We have an understanding of where we focus in on and who we're able to support. One of the key drivers that I like to speak to is what's their growth plan, what's their growth strategy, and that goes into how we're really able to help organizations scale on multi locations, multi time zones, those pieces, and really kind of hones in on why we're focusing in on revenue cycle management right now, making sure that agencies are able to collect cash as rapidly as they can, which is going to allow them to be as prepared as they can be for other future unknowns. We faced a pandemic that I don't think anyone in our working generation right now has experienced, and things like PPE were a big issue, and having cash to be able to purchase that was important at that time. I think it's levied out a bit now, but it still points into a key reason why you're going to want to have cash on hand. It's king.
Cash flow. Yeah. That's always at the top of the list. What are some of the issues that you hear from your clients? As this question could go out to either one of you. What are the challenges they're dealing with in the non-medical home care world today? What do you hear from them?
From the prospective client side, sometimes customer service even comes to it, is customer service on how to utilize their platforms efficiently. Again, there's great platforms out there to help streamline and automate a lot of their processes, but not necessarily knowing how to use them as efficiently as they can is one of the items. Ashley, from our customer base, I don't know if you want to add some more.
Yes, certainly on that, making sure that we're utilizing. So a lot of clients that came on 2 or 3 years ago don't necessarily utilize all the functions that get released. I think that's true, of any platform that someone is using. I will go back to that concept of like every solution tries to create efficiency. I think through the years, what I've seen, and I've been a user on the agency side on many platforms, is they tend to become just expensive data repositories, essentially big filing cabinets, right? It's just that they're digitized. So the pieces that we're looking for are particularly around revenue cycle, because I think EVV has become somewhat of a commodity, particularly with the Cures Act, and it's free to many agencies in many states, that EVV component. Free as in, I don't know what, not necessarily free, but free to them. So EVV is a commodity. If we can look at revenue cycle and improve cash flow, reduce clicks, I think we can create a lot of efficiency there. And I think the probably the most telling piece that speaks to the fact that current platforms are not doing this is the growth of consultants around revenue cycle. It's probably one of the fastest. If you go back over the past 5 to 8 years, it's probably seen the most growth in the consulting industry for the home health sector. Actually, the healthcare sector as a whole, I would say, it's consulting around revenue cycle. So that, I think that speaks to the fact that the solutions are not necessarily creating efficiency there. And that's where we want to put our focus, reduce the need for that additional service, provide insight into where your claims are, create clean claims going out the door, so there is less issues to investigate, but also enable a true collections module, which I think sometimes is lacking.
I always hear the term revenue cycle management with relation to Medicare providers. So help me to understand where it fits among your clientele. I know that you bill to a wide array of payers, Medicare, Medicaid insurance, and the patient, but maybe my knowledge of exactly what you do and how you do it is limited. Where does revenue cycle management come in to the non-medical home care world?
Certainly. I mean, about 50% of our clients at this point are probably private pay, maybe less now. We're seeing a shift. So the private pay, the ease of use for the agency to set up ACH or recurring credit card payments. So a strong integration with a credit card processor, so that those invoices can be created, pushed directly to the credit card. So recurring charges there, rather than printing out invoices, sending in, and then log in here to pay via credit card. So a tight integration with credit card processes on the private pay side, plus creation of those invoices and statements is key on that side. On the other side, the Medicaid, the insurances, the VA programs, we're seeing ever rising complexity. And I think it's probably more complex than the Medicare world, just because, there's each state has their own requirements, and then within each state is the MCOs. So they all have their flavor of the 837, be it a professional or an institutional, making sure that those data points are accurate. They're audited before the claim goes out, so that it's in compliance, meets all the needs. So submitting a clean claim, essentially, we're very focused on that. And then at the same time, bringing those payments back in, ERA payments, and being able to auto post those payments wherever they come from, whichever payer, Medicaid, VA, private insurance, the MCOs. So for us, it's not too dissimilar to Medicare, except I believe there's a lot more complexity because there's a lot more variation within the industry in the States.
When the pandemic hit, there was suddenly a great need to take care of people remotely. Have you been, either of you, seeing increased use of any of the new remote patient monitoring systems being used in home care, and not just the traditional tabletop vital sign monitors, but there are a lot of patient communication systems, family communications, secure texting, all of those things. What are you seeing happening? And while you're answering that, what do you think is going to happen after the pandemic subsides?
I found it was actually kind of interesting. Several agencies that I spoke to actually had a reduced patient census due to COVID and not wanting individuals in their homes. And it became ever more important for offering forms of communication and having, like you said, secure texting, family portals. Those were all becoming more requested. As we spoke to potential clients, it is something we have both those, but it did come up more frequently in conversations from my side of it. Ashley, how about you?
Yeah, I agree. Initially, there was a bit of a downturn. We then saw, with the closure or restricted access to the community adult daycare centers, we then started to see census increase in certain areas, particularly due to that, actually, versus the Medicare, post-acute discharge. It was more related to the scarce resources now available for adult daycare. So we saw an organic increase in census there. On the remote monitoring side, I think people went back to basics. We saw a lot of requests to expose telephone numbers, Zoom integration with video platforms. Those requests came through, which we don't currently have. It is on our roadmap. We don't currently have the video conferencing. The one piece that we did do immediately is we released SMS messaging from within the application and from within our scheduling component, particularly to caregivers, so that we could communicate more effectively with caregivers, or our clients could communicate more effectively with caregivers. So I haven't seen, anyone embracing these new technologies. There was a little bit of flirting with it in the beginning. I then think the idea of implementing those solutions on top of dealing with the pandemic and managing the workforce kind of scared a lot of our folks off. I do think it's coming. In fact, I think this weekend there was an article released that projected, $250 billion industry to grow around telemedicine, telehealth. So it's coming. I just think people were so busy dealing with the day-to-day of managing the workforce and their clients that they couldn't even think of a new strategic initiative.
The other thing that the pandemic has left us with is people working from home. Among your clients in the home care world, I imagine that you're seeing quite a bit of that. And there's been some talk about how a lot of companies have learned to like it and might continue with letting people work from home. They're attracted to the idea of shrinking their office size and saving on their rent payments. Have you heard talk about that? Have you gotten feedback from your clients about the work at home idea, and if it's something that they might keep doing later?
The majority have obviously embraced that. Funny enough, just last week I was talking with one of our agency owners, and they actually have reduced their office size by 50%. Their lease was up. They were actually pre-pandemic and pre-tech stack implementation. They were actually considering doubling the size of their office, but through efficiencies and then through the reality of the pandemic and that, it's possible, they actually have reduced their office space. So that's one very tangible example. But yeah, every time we're in communication with these agencies, there's a significant number of the folks on the call are remote and working from home. There are still the diehards with masks on and going to the office. Some people prefer that, but for the majority are definitely at home.
Well, here is what I keep hearing over and over again along those lines. Home networks, home routers are not nearly as secure as the ones that you might find in a typical office. You have an IT department that builds up your safety and security and virus protection, hacking protection, all of that in a corporate environment where it's cost effective. You might have 20, 30, 40, 50 people working in an office, right? But when you're talking about working from home, all of a sudden now, instead of 50 people gathered, you have 50 homes to deal with, and every single one of them has a different level of security, different level of protection. And the IT department might still be responsible for making sure that the entire corporate network is safe. So people are going to turn to their tech vendors. They're going to turn to their software vendors, whether or not security is one of your main functions. Have you been asked that? And what do you plan to do to help people to get through this this particular problem, especially if it's going to become permanent with people working at home beyond the pandemic?
No, certainly. Sorry.
From an agency management software platform perspective, I mean, we had to solve that issue when it came to a mobile app for caregivers from the start, because you have all of their client and patient data that they're tracking and documenting electronically. So I think that is something that it is a platform we were kind of required to make sure we're able to solve from the beginning. Ashley, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, internally, we always had a VPN to access sensitive resources, from an internal organization standpoint. But just by very nature of being a web-based, SaaS web-based solution, we had to ensure that we were secure. We're running on the Azure platform as a service, so there's less surface area for attack. And I don't want to tempt fate. I mean, everything is vulnerable in this world, right? But running on the Azure platform definitely provides a level of security, and then obviously SSL as would be required by HIPAA anyway. So that the fundamentals had to be there pre-pandemic for us. The other piece that we've taken on and committed to is we perform 2 penetration tests a year, and we hire an outside company to do that. And then a list of critical issues, minor issues in terms of how they kind of produce it. So using an external audit is probably one of our biggest security checks above and beyond, the basics of security that we engage in.
One of the things that I also continue to hear along these lines is that the bad guys, I don't know if there's a formal word, the offshore international hacker community has learned that firewalls have gotten tough, protections that, like the one you're talking about, have gotten more and more secure. And so what they've turned to is social engineering. They can fool people into answering a phone call and giving away a password, or clicking on an email that looks exactly like it came from your employer when it didn't. The only defense against that is training. Now, I know that Savii has a partnership with some online training companies, at least one, Nevin. I don't know if there are any others, but have you done anything, or are you thinking about doing anything along the educational platform to try to prevent security breaches just by uplifting the knowledge base of the most vulnerable people who are often fooled into clicking on the wrong thing?
That's a great question. So yes, I do now that you've brought it up. And Navan would be a great partner to publish that kind of content. We do it during the initial training, and why we haven't thought about, we also do it internally, and we actually have a couple of folks that send out fake phishing emails. And so we do an education series. A month or two later, we send out some fake emails and see if we catch anyone clicking on something they shouldn't. So we do it internally, but I've actually never thought about ongoing education. I'm embarrassed to say ongoing education for our agencies, but that would be a good follow-up, because after the initial implementation, we obviously lose people, and then you don't necessarily get to have that conversation with new people that are starting. So that's a great idea. The other piece that we baked into our software is kind of like a walk me solution. So can train you as you go through the solution. We should actually put something in there and force an annual or a semi-annual competency on that. So we have the capability. I'm embarrassed to say we haven't done that with our client base yet.
One of the things that that links to then is the thing you mentioned before about how in most industries, not just in healthcare, people use 10, 20, 30% of the capabilities of their primary vertical application, their agency management software. You mentioned turnover after initial training. Is there something that you have put in place, or maybe are thinking of put in place, to continue ongoing training as personnel change among your client base?
Yes, so there's a couple different things that we are now doing or capable of doing, is having true account management for our customer base. While the account management isn't necessarily focused on training and true form of training, however, they are in place to work through optimizing and ensuring that the customer is using as much of the product and functionality as they certainly can be. They additionally have access to video resources and continuation or duration of them being a customer. So that would enable some training. But I think the direct one-on-one account management is a key factor in ensuring they're using the product to its fullest.
We're also not there yet. As I mentioned, we've gone with a third party, embedded it in our software. It's called UserLane. And that allows us to provide just-in-time instruction. It becomes a frequently asked question piece, but more important, you can put it into a mode that takes the user step by step. They can say, how do I enter a referral? And it highlights the field by field, telling you what you have to complete and what information should go where. So it kind of walks you through, it walks you through the processes, and we're in the process of building that out. We've integrated it. We have a few use cases, and we're continuing to build that. That I believe will be a significant improvement for most agencies, and is the advantage of a web-based solution, is the option to build that in,
as opposed to a solution that's installed locally on the customer's servers. Yeah, you have a great deal more flexibility in the SaaS environment.
Yes, exactly.
We're getting close to the end of our time. I want to make sure I give both of you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about your long-range plans. I know that you have a number of modules in your agency management software. I know that you have been adding features So give us a preview. What is coming? What do your customers tell you they need, and what are you gonna give them as time goes on?
Ashley, why don't you take what's going on under the hood?
So I'd break it into three areas. The near term is definitely, as we mentioned earlier, revenue cycle. So automating as much of that process and providing insight into where the process is breaking down. So again, cash flow. So that's the near term. In the longer term, and it's not that far out, is remote video visits. Basically, we have it in our backlog. We've scoped it out. We've done the necessary research. We have the requirements for the developers to start moving. So as soon as it becomes, as soon as it's prioritized, it's ready to go. That will be a key piece. And there's more to it than just this kind of Zoom call, right? Once you schedule a video visit, you want to be able to send easy links, secure links and reminders, and capture the information from the visit, make sure you can bill for it. So there's a lot to that. That's definitely on our strategic roadmap. And then the other piece is, and we're actually pushing this out into production next week, is medication administration using First Drug Bank, and then some workflow off of that also automates the order process to physicians, again, for that Medicaid insurance population where we need orders and medication interactions, and then building out our custom forms. So we have a custom form module that we just need to expand upon to give folks a lot more power over the nature of the clients that they're seeing. And there is a shift there, right? From the personal care to what I'd call more skilled nursing care. We're definitely seeing a shift there. Hence the focus on medication administration and clinical forms, beefing up our clinical forms. So that's, it probably doesn't sound that innovative, but it is, at the end of the day, we're being driven by what our customers are asking for. And I think that's where we need to go.
Yeah, and Jenna, maybe you could wrap up from what Ashley said, that you're in touch with what the customers are saying in your business development position. What are they asking for? What are their what were their top one or two problems that they look to you to solve?
Top one or two. There's quite a few problems that I think we hear from, unfortunately. I think one of the bigger ones is not having to use multiple platforms to achieve their day-to-day processes and functionality. I kind of had talked about earlier being able to handle, multi-locations and larger scale organizations. Some organizations with their current tech stack are, may need to log in and out of multiple different logins based on different branches. And that in itself can be extraordinarily cumbersome, let alone if they're using an agency management platform, a payroll platform, a HR platform, and applicant tracking. So having solutions around how to minimize the number of passwords they need to remember. I think that's something aside from just in this industry that on our own day-to-day basis, having fewer passwords is nicer. And just being able to then handle their day-to-day functions in fewer platforms or an integrated one.
I take that for granted. We do have I tend not to mention it, but we have a very innovative org structure within our application. You can move the organization, reconfigure, grow, become multi-state, international. We have an install in UK. Our whole integrated database. So a very large, complex organization can use our platform, and a single, owner operator user can run our platform too. That's a big differentiator, I think, for us.
One last thing comes to mind before I let you go. There's been a great movement in the direction of Medicaid waivers, home and community-based services being reimbursed directly by the state or by managed care organizations. All of the home care software companies who are watching this happen have been kind of struggling with building functionality. What direction is Savii going to help people who find that that portion of their business is increasing?
We were actually fortunate early on, at least early on in Jenna and I's relationship with Savii, to have a couple of customers that helped drive us in that direction. So early in the process, we actually put hooks into the system to identify consumer directed or waivers, as you put it, or the ASAPs up in Massachusetts. And to Jenna's point, not logging in multiple visits for the multiple services that would be billed within a visit, and or the ability for a caregiver to initiate a visit without it being scheduled. So we actually we have that capability built into Savii. There's always a slightly different flavor as we encounter a customer in a new state with how that might look. But the fundamentals are there for us. We can actually handle consumer directed, again, because we were fortunate enough to have a relationship in New York and then Massachusetts, both who had significant populations in the consumer directed.
I'm going to give you one last chance to look toward the future before we sign off. Home care, optimistic about what's coming or worried? Who wants to go first?
Optimistic. Sorry, go on.
Go ahead.
Optimistic with a few caveats. I do think the industry has been driving towards community-based care, home care for a while. The pandemic has reinforced that. So optimistic from that standpoint. I think a continued focus on value-based purchasing type deals. I think home care is coming more into that mix. Typically, it was that Medicare world. I think home care and Medicaid is coming more into that mix. Non-traditional care occurring in the community, again, a reason for optimism. And I do recognize that folks are thinking about interoperability a lot more. And there's a lot more players in the space that will allow us to match our platform with a Navan or with a Dina from Prepared Health, so that there's a lot in place that will help us build that network around the client and the caregiver. So optimistic from that standpoint. The concern, as always, is the availability of caregivers and our ability as an industry to attract and retain caregivers, which comes down to reimbursement in order to, a living wage. So optimistic.
All right, Jenna?
I think I'm going to echo Ashley and just slightly add to something that Ashley and I were talking about earlier this week. And what can we do to continue to drive towards the optimism and reduce our worries? And that becomes the pertinence and importance of advocacy and working with the associations across the country that do both state and federal lobbying and advocacy to help support reimbursement rates, especially for the Medicaid portion. Private pay, they can set their own rates. But that's something that I think is going to help support those needs. There has been some legislature in DC the past few years as well to try to carve out more, allow for more immigration to try to support the caregiver population that we might be servicing. So I think those type of tactics are going to become crucial to really help support our workforce management issues and reimbursement issues.
Terrific. Well, this has been an enlightening discussion for me. I want to thank both of you, Ashley Wharton and Jenna Schwartz from Savii. Jenna, go ahead and let people know how they can get in touch with you if they need to, website, email, etc.
Absolutely. So you can go ahead and give us a call directly at either 813-773-1603 or www.savicare.com. Tim, is there anything else you'd like me to add to go ahead and give that contact?
No, that's good. I'll include it in the text introduction also, so that people don't have to rewind in order to hear you say it again.
That'd be great.
Okay, thanks again to both of you, and thanks all of you for joining us for this series of Meet the CEO. Jenna, Ashley, thanks again, and goodbye, everybody. I'll see you next month.
Thank you so very much. Take care.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.